In video game narratives, we always know who we have to beat, but it doesn't always feel good, does it? Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 game villains we felt bad for. Just as a really quick disclaimer, this is going to contain spoilers for all the games we're talking about, so please understand and have ample warning. Spoiler alert. Starting off at number 10 is Letho from The Witcher 2. Letho was a hired assassin who is set out to get the heads of kings and also a witcher. Yes, it did get Geralt wrongly prosecuted, but he had good intentions, as do many of the villains that we'll be mentioning on this list. Letho was hired by Nilfgaard in order to assassinate their enemy faction rulers to weaken their morale so they could take over. However, Letho was promised that all witchers would be granted a safe haven and would be treated fairly and equally. Letho just wanted his kind to be deemed humans, not abominations. Basically, he was trying to do something that was bad in order to negotiate a deal in which his kind were dealt with as equals instead of as freaks. I mean, it's really not that hard to understand why he'd take on this kind of a contract. If Nilfgaard won and controlled everything and honored their end of the bargain, witchers would be in a much better place, societally speaking. It's just that his deeds were definitely bad, and definitely negatively impact another witcher, Geralt specifically. Moving on to number 9, Logan MacTyr from Dragon Age Origins. Logan is such a well-written bad guy. Like, at the start, you're like, that's gonna be the bad guy. He just exudes bad guy. And he does kind of take over. Well, not really kind of, like fully takes over. And he's kind of paranoid and really does some bad stuff, like allowing elves to be sold into slavery. But the more you hear about his motives, the more you hear him talk, you're just like, I just want to give you a chance, man. Like, just make the right choices. Can you do that for me? Now, if you do give him a chance and recruit him into your party, you do very much offend Alistair, and that's that for him. He's gone. I mean, this is for obvious reasons. Logan denies him as an heir for the kingdom and essentially usurps, and in a lot of scenarios attempts to stage a coup. But if you do recruit him and you learn more about him after the fact, he's actually pretty gracious and humble, and does learn his lesson. It comes at quite a cost, though, let's just say. Moving on to number 8, it's Kessler from Infamous. Now, if you want to talk about a morally ambiguous character, Kessler is the guy to start with. Oof, it's really hard to say anything other than gray, morally gray. Yeah, he's of course the bad guy. He's the antagonist of the story, the big bad. He's also you from a desolate future, come back to try to put things right. I mean, the way that he picks to do it, which is to come back and be a bad guy, is odd, a bit strange, so to speak, but it did work. It did make you, Cole, commit to be ready for the beasts coming. So, it worked?
Robin, son of a bitch.
And number 7 is General Tullius from Skyrim. Now, there's actually quite a few reasons you could put Tullius on this list. It's my opinion the main reason is that he understands the conflict going on, the Civil War. Might seem like it's a rebellion, like it's about freedom for Skyrim, etc., but is ultimately a ploy by the Thalmor. Not necessarily entirely, but the Thalmor are who benefits from it. They also make sure that the Stormcloaks are armed and dangerous and have supplies and funding and... well, it's almost like they want the fight to keep happening. You find all this out if you kill this man by siding with the Stormcloaks and hunting him down. And in truth, this gentleman proves that he understands the situation probably better than anyone else, but conceding to the Stormcloaks about the general decadence of the Empire, but asserting with his final words that they are not the enemy, it's the Thalmor. Of course, if you're hearing him say that stuff, you still gotta kill him. But he makes a very good point. If the Thalmor decide they want a full-on war, weakening the Empire by splitting Skyrim off is a good strategy. Number 6 is Josh from Until Dawn. Now, let's just start off by saying Josh is kinda mentally ill. That doesn't exempt anyone from bad guy status, but here's the thing. The stunts he pulled really weren't intended to hurt anyone. He basically punched a couple of people and put movie props in some places. On top of that, Josh is the only character that can't get a happy ending. He either gets trapped in the mines and turns into one of the monsters, or he gets his head beaten in. Like, there aren't any other choices for him. And yeah, his actions are ultimately huge causes of big problems, but it's hard not to just feel bad for him.
Can't tie him up if they just wiggle around. Gosh, dude!
At number 5 is Nier's Shadow Lord. Now, probably the biggest spoiler you can give is that Shadow Lord is the original Nier. More specifically, it's Nier separated from Nier's body, and has the exact same goals as the replicant Nier, who you play as, but Shadow Lord just wants to save his daughter and humanity. Obviously, Shadow Lord is coming from a bit different of a perspective, however, as replicant Nier, as he is actually 1,330 years old. Now, it's hard to fault him for any of this. Stuff obviously gets pretty messed up through the course of the game, and like Nier Automata, it's a confusing game. However, it's actually Nier's death, Shadow Lord's death, that causes Nier Automata. Honestly, we could literally talk for hours about the stories of either of these games. They're brilliant, sad, melancholic, and will cause you to think so much. At number 4 is Logan from Fable 3. The protagonist from Fable 2 is his parent, and after the protagonist dies, he takes over, and while the Industrial Revolution continues for a while and people don't necessarily hate him at first, eventually becomes seen as sort of like a dictator. Pain and suffering isn't really a big deal to him, and the advancement of the kingdom and industry is. This usually isn't something that people love in a ruler. But as you confront him about this, later in the story, and after some choices you can make, you find that he really didn't want to be the ruler. He really didn't want to be doing what he was doing. He thought it was the only thing he could do. He also says to you, the hero of Fable 3, that you did what he couldn't, which is save the kingdom. Part of the problem here is that he's also your sibling, and it's kind of impossible for your character, at least, not necessarily you, to hate him, despite his horrific actions early in the game. At number 3 is Handsome Jack from Borderlands 2, who is, of course, not a cool dude. However, he has a background that makes you understand a lot of who he is. His father died when he was young, and rather than take care of him like a mother, you'd hope would do, his mother turned him over to his grandmother, who was abusive. Now, does that necessarily excuse him for being a dictator? Not necessarily, but the more you understand him and his decline mentally, the harder it is to hate him. In fact, by the end of the game, although you definitely want him out of power, it's really hard not to pity Handsome Jack. As with a lot of people who have issues with control in the world, he ended up taking it to an extreme. I mean, again, dictator, not cool. But in a lot of ways, it's a tragedy that could have been averted simply by a parent showing a child love. It's hard not to think that he wouldn't have become what he was with a different background. At number 2 is Andrew Ryan in BioShock. Now, while the ideology of Andrew Ryan is not necessarily one that is sympathetic, I think that he was outwardly wrong in a lot of things that he did. However, his motives for building Rapture are simply that of freedom. He didn't want to have greater powers, such as the state, or any other corrupt consolidation of power breathing down his neck. I get that. I feel that myself. I kind of think we all do. But obviously, things went horrifically wrong. And as the situation in the city developed, he clearly became something that he did not set out to be. While it was touted as scientific progress, a lot of the things that happened in Rapture are utterly horrific, such as the experimentation on young girls. The concept of the Little Sisters, horrific, and ultimately Andrew Ryan became power hungry to try to preserve a utopian vision that just never materialized. His last moments are haunting. He understands the gravity, the weight of everything that happened, and was clearly just waiting around for his own death. Again, this doesn't make him a good guy. I mean, we're obviously talking about villains who did bad things, but I certainly saw the humanity in Andrew Ryan at the end. And at number 1 is Rubik from The Evil Within. Now, while some unsavory things are said about his love for his sister, ultimately putting that aside, what he really wanted was peace. He wanted to live out his days in his own skin, with his sister in the STEM system. He was experimented on, in his eyes tortured, and in a lot of ways, he's not really the bad guy, although he is obviously the antagonist. This guy experienced too much loss. It's not fair. In fact, a lot of these villains did. What do you think? Leave us a comment. Let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So subscribe, and don't forget to enable all notifications. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time, right here on gameranx.